A few years ago, a police department in Canada received a call about a dangerous suspect blocking traffic. The suspect was aggressive, refused to move, had chased multiple people, and seemed completely uninterested in cooperating with authorities. The suspect was a goose, which sounds ridiculous until you've met one, because geese have somehow achieved something that very few animals ever accomplish. They've convinced an entire species, ours, that they're completely unhinged. Think about it. Most birds fly away when humans get too close. Geese sometimes do the exact opposite. They walk toward us, hiss at us, chase us, and stare at us with the kind of expression usually reserved for someone reading a restaurant review they personally disagree with. At this point, angry goose isn't even a stereotype. It's basically a scientific classification. But here's the strange thing. Most of the time, geese aren't actually angry. In fact, the reason they look so permanently offended has less to do with their mood and more to do with a bizarre combination of evolution, psychology, and one surprisingly effective survival strategy. Because when scientists started studying why humans interpret certain animal faces the way they do, they discovered something fascinating. Your brain is constantly assigning emotions to things that aren't expressing emotions at all. Cars look happy, houses look sad, some clouds look like they're plotting revenge. And geese? Well, geese accidentally evolved what might be nature's most convincing case of resting angry face. But that's only half the story. Because if you've ever been chased by a goose, you know there has to be something else going on. If you've ever walked through a park, a golf course, or basically any patch of grass within 100 feet of a goose, you've probably had the same thought. Why does that bird look like it wants to fight me? Not attack me, not scare me, fight me. And honestly, geese aren't doing themselves any favors here. They hiss, they stare, they march toward people with the confidence of a debt collector who knows exactly where you live. But here's the weird part. Most of the time, geese aren't actually angry. In fact, the reason they look so permanently offended has less to do with their mood and more to do with a strange combination of evolution, human psychology, and one surprisingly effective survival strategy. Because when scientists started looking at why humans interpret certain animal faces the way they do, they discovered something fascinating. Your brain is constantly assigning emotions to things that aren't expressing emotions at all. Cars look happy, houses look sad, some clouds look like they're plotting something. And geese? Well, geese accidentally evolved what might be nature's version of resting angry face. But that's only part of the story. Because if you've ever been chased by a goose, you know there has to be something else going on. These birds have developed a reputation that stretches across continents. Ask almost anyone what they think about geese, and you'll hear the same words. Mean, aggressive, territorial, unhinged. Which raises an interesting question. Did geese evolve to look angry because they are aggressive? Or did they become aggressive because looking angry works? As it turns out, the answer reveals something surprisingly clever about how these birds survive. And by the end of this video, you'll probably never look at a goose the same way again. Especially after learning why one of the most intimidating things geese do isn't actually meant for you at all. Let's start with the face, because that's where this whole misunderstanding begins. The goose face problem. The first reason geese look angry is surprisingly simple. Their faces are basically a psychological trap. Humans are incredibly good at reading emotions. In fact, we're almost too good at it. Your brain evolved to analyze faces so quickly that it starts making judgments before you're even aware of them. Within a fraction of a second, you're already deciding whether something looks friendly, dangerous, trustworthy, or threatening. The problem is that your brain doesn't stop at humans. It applies the same rules to everything. That's why people think certain dogs look guilty, even though researchers have found that dogs aren't actually making guilty faces. They're usually just responding to your behavior. It's why some cars look happy and others look angry. And it's why geese have a public relations problem. Take a close look at a goose. Their eyes sit relatively high on the head. Their beak slopes downward. The dark markings around their face create what looks suspiciously like a permanent scowl. To a human brain, those features check a lot of the same boxes associated with anger, even when the bird is completely relaxed. If geese had a marketing department, they'd probably demand an immediate redesign. Unfortunately for them, evolution doesn't care about branding. Evolution cares about survival, and that's where things start getting interesting. Because while geese may not actually be angry all the time, looking intimidating turns out to be incredibly useful. Imagine you're a fox, or a coyote, or any animal looking for an easy meal. You spot two birds. One looks nervous, the other looks like it just got banned from 3 separate parks for fighting. Which one are you approaching? Exactly. From an evolutionary perspective, appearing confident is often just as valuable as being dangerous. Sometimes all an animal needs to do is convince others that starting a fight would be a terrible idea. And geese are exceptionally good at that. Researchers studying animal behavior have found that many species rely on visual signals to avoid conflict. A threatening posture, a particular coloration, or an intimidating display can stop fights before they happen. That's important because fights are expensive. Even if you win, you can still get injured. For a wild animal, an injury can be life-threatening. So nature often rewards creatures that can scare others away without ever throwing the first punch, which means the goose's angry appearance may actually be one of its greatest survival tools. The real reason. Geese chase people. If geese were truly as aggressive as their reputation suggests, parks would be absolute chaos. Every pond would look like a tiny, feathery battlefield. But that's not what happens. Most geese spend the majority of their lives doing surprisingly normal goose activities. Eating grass, swimming, taking naps, arguing with other geese about goose-related issues. So why do they occasionally transform into what appears to be an airborne security team? The answer is family. And suddenly, their behavior becomes a lot more understandable. Researchers who study Canada geese have found that much of their aggressive behavior is concentrated around nesting season. During this time, geese aren't just protecting themselves, they're protecting eggs, partners, and eventually, vulnerable goslings that can't yet defend themselves. From the goose's perspective, the situation is pretty simple. Something large is approaching. That thing could be dangerous. Deal with the problem before it gets closer. What makes this remarkable is how similar that instinct is across the animal kingdom. Bears protect cubs. Elephants protect calves. Birds protect nests. Humans protect families. The strategy changes. The motivation stays surprisingly consistent. And geese have developed a method that works incredibly well. Instead of waiting for danger to arrive, they try to stop it before it becomes a problem. That's why a goose may start hissing when you're still dozens of feet away. It's essentially sending a message, a very loud message, one that translates roughly to, whatever you're doing, do it somewhere else. And honestly, it works. Most people immediately back away, which means the goose wins without needing to fight. Geese remember more than you think. By now, we've established 2 things. First, geese look angry because your brain interprets their facial features that way. Second, they sometimes act aggressive because they're protecting something important. But neither of those explanations fully accounts for their reputation. Because if you've spent enough time around geese, you start to notice something strange. They seem aware, not just alert, aware, like they're paying attention to far more than you expected. And as it turns out, they are. Researchers have discovered that geese possess surprisingly strong memories, especially when it comes to places, routes, and social relationships. Every year, millions of geese migrate enormous distances, sometimes traveling thousands of miles between seasonal habitats, and somehow they manage to find many of the exact same locations over and over again. The same lakes, the same fields, the same nesting grounds, the same stopover points. Imagine moving across an entire continent and somehow finding the same parking lot every year, without GPS, without road signs, without a smartphone constantly telling you to recalculate. That's essentially what geese are doing. A goose carries a mental map of its world, places where food was abundant, places where danger appeared, places where it successfully raised young, places where it felt safe, and those memories shape future decisions. Geese don't just remember places, they remember each other. If you've ever watched a flock of geese, it can be easy to assume you're looking at dozens of identical birds moving together as a single unit. But to a goose, that couldn't be further from the truth. Because geese live surprisingly social lives. Many species form long-term pair bonds, sometimes remaining together for years. Parents stay connected with offspring. Family groups often travel together. In other words, geese don't simply live near each other, they know each other. Researchers studying social birds have found that recognizing individuals is incredibly important. It helps animals maintain bonds, coordinate behavior, and avoid unnecessary conflict. The goose isn't always staring because it's angry. Sometimes it's staring because it's trying to figure out exactly who it's looking at. Friend, family, neighbor, stranger, potential threat? The answer matters. And once you begin seeing geese through that lens, something funny happens. That intimidating look starts to resemble concentration. The bird isn't plotting your downfall, it's just trying to understand the situation. Granted, it may still decide to chase you afterward, but at least now there's a process involved. Why geese are always watching. Have you ever noticed that geese rarely seem completely relaxed? Even when an entire flock is resting, there's usually at least one bird standing upright with its head raised scanning the area. It's almost as if they're taking shifts. And in a way, they are. Researchers call this behavior vigilance. Many social animals rely on collective vigilance to stay safe. Instead of every individual constantly watching for danger, members of the group share the responsibility. Some feed, some rest, some keep watch. The result is a system that's remarkably efficient. The goose standing there looking judgmental may actually be performing one of the most important jobs in the flock. It's the lookout. While everyone else is busy eating grass, the lookout is monitoring movement, sounds, and potential threats. And once you know this, something funny happens. The goose expression suddenly makes perfect sense. Imagine being responsible for security at a concert. Thousands of people are enjoying themselves. You're the one person looking for problems. You probably wouldn't look relaxed either. The problem is that our brains often confuse attention with hostility. So when a goose locks onto you from across a field, your brain immediately jumps to, "That bird hates me." Meanwhile, the goose is often doing something much less dramatic. It's simply gathering information. The real reason. Geese look angry. So after all of this, we can finally answer the question, why do geese always look angry? The surprising answer is that they usually aren't. What you're seeing is the result of several completely different traits overlapping at once. A facial structure that accidentally resembles a scowl, a survival strategy built around intimidation, a highly social animal constantly evaluating its surroundings, a vigilant flock member paying attention to potential threats, and a bird that has learned that confidence is often more effective than conflict. Put all of those things together and you get something unusual. An animal that looks furious even when it's perfectly calm. Nature essentially created a bird with permanent resting angry face. And somehow, that turned out to be a fantastic survival strategy. Because think about it. How many animals would willingly challenge a creature that always looks ready for an argument? How many predators decide it's simply not worth the trouble? How many humans immediately give a goose extra personal space? Exactly. The appearance works. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not about geese, about perception. Because the things that appear obvious at first glance are often the things we understand the least. The goose staring at you from across a pond may not be angry. It may be curious, alert, protective, focused, or maybe it's simply existing while your brain does all the storytelling. Either way, it's probably not thinking about you nearly as much as you think it's thinking about you. Which, honestly, is true for most of us. If you've ever had a memorable encounter with a goose, or any animal that completely changed your opinion of it, let me know in the comments. And next time you see a goose staring in your direction, don't immediately assume it's angry. It might just be the world's most misunderstood bird. Thanks for watching.